Good morning, this is Martin with Maya Parts, and today we're going to be going over some of the more advanced functions and troubleshooting techniques for the M-Triangel PGoneS Laser Separation Machine. So the first thing we're going to be going over is changing the language for the M-Triangel program. In some cases the machine will ship from the factory not in English, but it's actually a really quick fix. So if you turn your attention to the upper left hand side of the program here, you'll see a gear icon. That gear icon is a settings menu. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it's the very last option here, which is the language setting. English is right in the middle, and it should be in English. As you can see, the rest of the program is not, but the word English is, which makes it a little easier. And the left button here is the OK. You'll see that the program is still not in English, but I'm going to go ahead and close the program and restart it. And what you'll see going forward, oh, that's right, I'm actually down here. Upon restart, the program will be in English this time, so go ahead and give that a second here to start back up. And there we go. Everything is completely in English. Well, except for this section here, but that's really not too important. The rest of the interface will be completely in English. Let me just go ahead and rescale this here to fit my screen. So as you can see, the configurations are in English. Most of the program is in English except for these couple headers, but that's not really too important. When you go to things like brand, I need to reset my templates. But of course, the configuration, everything is completely in English. Another common scenario that we keep seeing with some of these machines is that when they come from the manufacturer, they won't have any templates pre-installed. Most of them do, but there's a couple that have kind of shipped in a bare state. It's a really easy fix. Just make sure that you have a Ethernet cable plugged into the back of the machine. It does need an active internet connection. And then when you go to the brand and model selectors, you're going to see them, but they actually won't be on the machine. These are being kind of streamed in from the cloud. So what you need to do is actually expand the window here somewhat, go all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see a download button. It's going to ask you if you want to download and replace all the local models. I've actually pulled all of my templates out of this folder. They are by default kept in a sjtcad/data folder within the local disk. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit yes to download and update all of those. It's going to start its downloading process, and once this is finished, you'll notice that it's actually going and repopulating that folder with all the missing templates. I actually moved mine over here to the back right here where it says backup. But all of these are the stock templates straight from the manufacturer. And I'll come back right when this is finished. Okay, the templates are updated and I have all the models here that I need. Now, just for reference, if yours does have templates but it's lacking the iPhone 11 templates, which I have here, the process for updating is actually really simple. It's pretty much the same as what we did earlier. Instead of using download, you're going to want to hit update instead, and that'll update the internal database with any missing templates, including iPhone 11. Another issue that we've seen with some models is that the red laser and white laser, essentially the preview and then the burning laser, aren't exactly aligned. The solution for that is another fairly simple process. It's a little more involved though. Over here on the left, I'm going to select the square tool. And you're going to make sure to start with a blank canvas, which is usually the default when the program launches. And right here in the middle, I'm just going to draw a simple square. And I'm going to hit F1, or you can also hit the red light preview there. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a preview of the drawing here. I'm using one of the black cards that comes with the machine. This is essentially a metal business card size object. But it works really good for doing these kind of previews. And once I see the preview here on the surface, I'm going to go ahead and hit F2, or you can also use the mark button here, and that's going to burn the square into this card. Okay, as you can see, it's this upper right square here. I'm going to hit F1 again. And as you can see, the laser pretty much lines up exactly with it. In some cases, the laser will actually be off, and fixing that's actually fairly simple. It just takes some trial and error. Over here, there's a config button. You can also just hit F3. And the menu that it brings up is this configuration menu. The upper right tab is something called red light, and what this does is this actually controls the red preview laser, so you can make physical adjustments here depending on how far it's off. So say for example it was let's change the x-axis, let's say it was off, I don't know, 4 millimeters to the left. This will actually compensate for that by 4 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and then do this again. And as you can see here, the red light is actually way off of where we originally printed. So if it came like this out of the box, the easy solution would be to go here into the configuration tool. I'm going to go ahead and cancel my preview. And then in the red light tab, you would want to go ahead and make the adjustments that you need. So let's say I wasn't sure exactly how much it was off, and I changed that to 2 millimeters. There we go. You can actually just hit red light preview without closing the box. And as you can see here, it's a little bit better. So I'm going to go back over here, cancel the preview, and then make my final 2 millimeter adjustment. I'll just zero that out. I'll hit red light preview again. And this time, let me just get in focus here. As you can see, it's much better. Now, I'm actually looking at mine. It's still slightly off. Looks like mine might have been that way from the get-go. So I'm just going to go ahead and make the fine-tune adjustment here. Let's see, it's off to the right. So let's subtract, I don't know. Maybe, that might be too little. It's like maybe 0.5 millimeter, so we'll go ahead and change that to 5. Do a red light preview. And it looks pretty much exact this time, so turns out mine actually needed some adjustment. And then once you're done with that, you can go ahead and hit OK, and that will save the new adjustments into the program. One thing that's related to the misalignment issue is a magnification issue. This is essentially where you have done the autofocus for a device that you want to work on, but the template's too big. So just to illustrate that process, I'm going to go ahead and hit F1 to start the preview process. And what you'll see here is essentially a template that's way too big, even after having already done the autofocus process. So as you can see, the outline is over here on the work surface. It's hitting the I guess the back bracket here, and all this is way off. So the proper way to do this is to actually go into the configuration menu. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel, or I'm sorry, the escape key. And I'm going to hit F3, or you can just hit this guy down here, the config button. And what you want to work with is something called area size. Now, just to kind of go over some of these right here, if the machine is offset somewhat, not just the red light preview, but also the entire burn process is offset, you can do some fine-tune adjustments using the X and Y axis. But for right now, we're just going to work with the area size. Essentially, what you want to do is, make some estimates. So the template is too large, which means we want to go up in value as far as the millimeters. I want to increase the area size that I'm working with. It's kind of backwards. So to make the print area smaller, I need to go up in millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 210, and I'm going to hit OK. And when I hit F1 again, I can see that it's better. It's not quite right, but it is better. I'm going to hit escape, and let's go back to the configuration menu and change this to let's try 215. and go back to OK. Hit F1 for the preview. And yeah, it's somewhat better here. It's not perfect, but it is better. So let's try working with the x-axis. Actually, before I do that, it'd probably help if I try to get an idea for how far it's off. Maybe that's 1 or 2 millimeters. And okay, so let's try that. So x-axis is off to the left, which means I want to increase this by, let's try 1 millimeter just to give it an estimate. Just hit OK. Okay, hit F1. And that does look quite a bit better. It's a little off here on the left, so let's try that again. This time we're going to, let's make this 0.5. Hit F1. Okay. Yeah, that looks a lot better. There's still some fine-tune adjustments that can be made on the template here. So for example, you'll notice that the edge here and the right edge here, the left and right edges are pretty spot on, as are the top and bottom edges, but this camera bracket is quite a bit off. So in the next section here, I'll show you how to adjust on a template level. Now, another problem that we've seen with this particular machine is that sometimes the templates need a little bit of adjustment. That's not the case with all templates, but keep in mind that each one of these templates is basically a drawing, and somebody had to make it. So it's sometimes they're not perfect. But what we're going to do here is to make a couple of fine-tune adjustments. And what I'm going to do now is the template's already selected, so I'm going to go here to the top where it has this icon which says Separate Group. And what this essentially did is just take apart the template. It's made of a bunch of different shapes. I'll click into the blank canvas to deselect, and then I'll go back and select the black part of the template again, and I'm going to hit the delete key. So as you can see here, it got rid of the fill, but it left the underlying shapes. What I'm going to do now is click on the camera part of this template. I'll hit F1 to go into preview mode. And what I'm going to do now is use the arrow keys to make adjustments to the camera bracket. And sometimes you'll see what it does is when you're hitting the arrow keys, it might freeze in place like I did right there. Excuse me, I'm kind of battling a cold here. If you hit the arrow key again, it starts back up. And it looks like maybe, yeah, that's about right. Okay, and I'm going to cancel the preview, click into the blank part of the canvas, and what I'm going to do now is drag to select the entire group of shapes, and then go up here to the fill icon, and the default settings are usually just fine, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and what that does is it actually regroups the entire collection of shapes and fills in the gaps. So this is essentially what we started with, but with the new adjustments we made to the camera. So if I hit F1 for the preview, you can see that the edges here are where I need them to be, and of course the camera bracket is now in the correct alignment. So once I hit F2 to start the burn, it will, it won't have any issues burning the areas that I wanted to avoid. I'm going to go ahead and hit escape because I don't have a fume extractor here, and you've already burned this part a lot. So once you're done with this, what I recommend is actually saving this to a new file. That way you don't mess with the original template. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File and Save As. And right here where I have iPhone 8 back cover, I'm going to go and, I don't know, give this something like Edit. And I'll hit Save. And In the future, if you need to access that template, it will be here in the model menu. Right now it won't be in here because the program actually does require that you close the program and restart it in order for that new template to show up. But it will be here right next to the original back cover, since it's all alphabetical order. And yeah, that's how you do an adjustment to a template. Okay, and the last thing we're going to go over today is etching text and images into a surface. This is a little more complicated than maybe some other programs would be, but it's not too hard. So first off, we're going to start with an image. I'm going to use the draw a picture file icon here. And the menu that pops up is going to ask you for a file. So I'll click this item here, and I already have a logo preloaded, which is our company logo. And I'm going to open that up and hit OK. As you can see here, it's a little too big. So I'm going to use the magnification minimize thing here to zoom out. And I just need to make this small enough that I can fit it right in the middle of the canvas. And that way I can zoom back in. I'll make this a little smaller because we're going to be burning it onto the back of that phone we were working on. And yeah, that looks about right. Now, the device that is on the work surface is the wrong orientation. Now, I mean, you could always just turn it this way, but that's not what we want to do. We want to have more of a precise alignment. So what we're going to do here is go over to the, actually it's not here, it's over this way. I'll go to Modify, go to Transformation, and you want to use this one. I already have it highlighted. This is the rotation tool. I have it set to 90 degrees. So hit Application, which is going to apply that transformation to our file. And as you can see, it kind of turned already here. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And it's right where we want it. I'm going to hit F1 just to make sure it's in the right place. Yeah, it's a little too big and it's a little off somewhat. So let's try... Well, actually, before I even move it, I should probably make it the right size. So I'm going to shrink that. Make sure it's this guy here. Shrink that, and then hit F1. Okay, that's a little better. So I'm going to use the arrow keys to position it a little better of where I want it. I don't know, I guess that's, I mean, it's good enough for this example. Okay, now this machine does not print color. Remember, the machine prints with a burning laser, so really it only has two colors, black or nothing. So you want to work with high contrast files. Ideally, one color vectors if you have them, but if not, there's a couple of things you can do here on the Object Properties window. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, convert this to grayscale. And then I want to turn the contrast all the way up and maybe turn the brightness down just a little bit so I get a little more definition in our logo M. And yeah, that should do just about right. Before I go that route, I'm going to add some text just so you guys can see what that looks like. Very similar process. Well, I'm going to make that just a bit bigger. I didn't even think of what I wanted to write, but you actually can't double click on this and change the text. It's a little less intuitive. So what you're going to want to do here is go down to this item here. This is the actual text box. And let's go to, what should I call this? I don't know, I guess technician, because I can't think of anything more original. Once that is there, and it's kind of how I want it, I'm going to go ahead and hit Application. And as you can see, it changed that over to that. Now, by default, it shows your text as outlined. I want to fill that in. So I'm going to go down here to the fill icon. And actually, before I do that, if you do want to change your font, there are some font options here. You can, you know, pick something a little more to the style that you want. I think I'm taking too long with this one, so I don't know. Let's go with that one. I think it might even be spelled wrong, but anyways. I go to the fill icon. All the defaults are just fine, so I'll hit OK. And I now have a filled piece of text. I'm going to go ahead and change the font size to something a little more appropriate. And then, of course, I'm going to want to change the orientation. 90 degrees is fine. Application. And then close this window. And there we have it. Pretty much just the way I wanted it to look. I guess ideally I'd want it to be maybe a little nicer looking, but you know, for the sake of our demonstration, it's good enough. I'll hit F1. It's a little off edge. I'll use the keyboard arrows. Let's see here. That's good enough. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and hit the burn, and it'll etch that into the back of our device. And there goes the logo, of course our Maya parts text, and then now the technician portion of it. And as you can see here, the technician text came out a lot darker because we were working directly with a black filled shape, whereas the Maya parts logo is more of a, it's an image. There's some gradation to it, so it's not perfect. So what I'm going to do here in order to get it a little more balanced, I'm going to delete the technician text. I already have it highlighted, so I'm just going to hit delete. And I'm left with just the Maya parts. So I'm going to go back over Maya parts a couple of times. And every time I go over the logo, it's going to get darker. And let's try it again. Now, because it's working with, you know, a raster graphic, which, you know, essentially it's, how do I explain it? You know, rasters are your traditional pictures, so it's, you know, it's not precise like a vector file will. You can kind of see here, the technician is what would be considered a vector file. It's strictly a shape with one color fill, whereas the Maya parts logo is raster. There's, you know, it was originally in color, there's some gradation to it. It's not just a flat color. And because of that, it's going to take a couple of times in order to get the effect that we want. Even though it looks like it's all one color here, I mean, you can actually tell there's some gray in there, so it's not exactly black. And the same could be said for the Maya parts text. It looks black, but it's not completely black. And so it might take a couple of times to go over this. The easiest solution to this problem is to use a vector file that's one color, ideally black, and the machine would just, you know, burn it in the same way that it burned technician here. Or at least that's my assumption. I don't have access to vector files here. But considering how it treated the technician text, I'm assuming that's pretty much how that would work out. So as you can see, it's getting darker little by little. The other thing you can do here is mess with some of the configuration options. So it's set to 95, which I think is fine for power. Speed, I don't know, let's make that 500. It'll take a little bit longer, but it'll do a better burn job. Well, somewhat better. It's still coming out as kind of a gray, but you guys get the basic idea. Essentially, the files that you put into this program are going to affect how well it burns. But yeah, that's the etching process. As I said, it only has two settings, burn and not burn. So raster and color images are going to have an effect on the output. But you can use that to your advantage. One of our technicians that we have, or rather I say one of the customers that buys from Maya, what they're doing is actually burning the shape that they want and then, you know, painting in the back. So there's ways to to get kind of a color effect. It's just, you know, really it's up to you as to how you want to get creative. Remember, when it's burning the surface, it's actually burning away the paint and leaving the clear surface underneath. So if you look at the corner of our device here, you can actually see the underlying frame, some of the brackets that are underneath the glass. It's burning away paint. So the more that you burn away the surface here, the more you're going to see of what's underneath. It's not printing black Technician ink, it's just burning away the white paint and revealing the black wireless charging mat underneath. So it really does depend on where you do your burn. If you were to do it higher up, you're going to see metal frame as opposed to the black. But you know, you can use that to your advantage and maybe find a way to get creative with the patterns that you're burning in there. But yeah, that's the etching process. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to you know, resolve it for you. And that applies to any of the steps that we went over today, whether it be the changing language or other settings, modifying templates, things like that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.